Elon Musk's son stole the spotlight in White House on Tuesday. Musk visited Trump in Oval Office press conference accompanied by his son XAEA-12, also known as X. As Trump was speaking in front of reporters and camera crews, Musk's son stole the show. The 4-year-old made faces and mirrored his father's gestures while Elon Musk spoke. He was pulling faces and interrupting his dad. Musk got distracted after he hoisted his son to his shoulders and X played with his father's ears. "Sorry for this," Musk said. "Otherwise, I might enjoy this, but as he's sticking his fingers in my ears," he added with a laugh. At some point, the 4-year-old picked his nose, which turned into memes. Musk's son even whispered something to Trump, who responded with a smile. "This is X, and he's a great guy," Trump said at the top of his remarks, calling the 4-year-old a high IQ individual. Musk was at the White House to witness Trump sign an executive order requiring federal agencies to cooperate with the Department of Government Efficiency's efforts to slash costs after facing pushback last week.
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about. And that is really an enormous number of condoms, if you think about it. If it went to Mozambique instead of Gaza, I'm like, okay, that's not as bad, but still, why are we doing that?
With agency heads, as you're directing these cuts, do they have how much input do agency heads have when you're making these decisions?
And the public gets it. The public gets it. You've seen the polls. The public is saying, why are we paying all this money? This for years, this has gone on.
Yeah, we work closely with the agency heads. There are sort of checks in place. So it's not just us just going in and doing things willy-nilly. It's in partnership with the agency heads, and I check frequently with the president to make sure that this is what the president wants to happen. So we talk almost every day, and I double check things to make sure, is this something, Mr. President, you want us to do this? Then we'll do it.
Do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID?
I think that there's some worthy things, but and we have, for example, turned on funding for Ebola prevention and for HIV prevention. Yes, correct. And we are moving fast, so we will make mistakes, but we'll also fix the mistakes very quickly. So,
do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID?
I think that there's some worthy things, but overall, if you say what was the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
Do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID?
I think that there's some worthy things, but
if you have received billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, and the president's directing you to look into the Department of Defense, is
yes,
that
which we
a
definitely need
conflict
to
of
do
interest?
and are going to do at the president's request.
Does that present a conflict of interest for you?
No, because you'd have to look at the individual contract and say, first of all, I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting for the contract. And I'd like to say, if you see any contract where where it was awarded to SpaceX and it wasn't by far the best value for money for the taxpayer, let me know, because every one of them was. When a payment goes out, it has to have the payment categorization folks, like what?
US President Donald Trump has floated the idea that Ukraine may be Russian someday as his Vice President J.D. Vance gears up to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky later this week. Pushing for an end to the nearly 3-year war with Russia, Trump discussed the conflict in an interview with broadcaster Fox News that aired. They may make a deal, they may not make a deal. They may be Russian someday, or they may not be Russian someday, he said. The USA wants to return the money allocated to Ukraine by the US government because one day it may become Russia, Donald Trump told. They have a land of tremendous value in terms of rare earth metal reserves, oil and gas, other things. I want our money to be safe because we're spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. They may make a deal. They may not make a deal. They may become Russia someday, may not become Russia. The American leader added that he wants the equivalent in the form of rare earth metals worth about $500 billion. According to him, this way the United States does not feel foolish. Earlier, on the 9th of February, the head of the Verkhovna Rada's Tax Committee, Daniil Hetmantsev, said that over the 30 years of Ukraine's existence, all licenses and permits for lucrative mineral deposits were handed out to private individuals, and now Kiev has nothing to offer its partners. A significant part of Ukraine wants to return to Russia and apparently has already done so. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said this in response to US President Donald Trump's statement that Ukraine could one day become Russia. It is a fact that a significant part of Ukraine wants to become Russia, and it is already becoming Russia. This is a fact that is happening. 4 new regions of Russia. The people who, despite many dangers, stood in line and voted in a referendum to join the Russian Federation. This is consistent with the words of President Trump. Trump is pressing for a swift end to the conflict, while Zelensky is calling for tough security guarantees from Washington as part of any deal with Russia. Kiev fears that any settlement that does not include hard military commitments, such as NATO membership or the deployment of peacekeeping troops, will just allow the Kremlin time to regroup and rearm for a fresh attack. Zelensky spokesperson Sergei Nikiforov told Agence France Presse the Ukrainian president would meet with Vance this Friday on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. The West can crush Russia's war machine and force Putin to the negotiating table with a Cold War-style strategy. Ian Brzezinski, a former deputy assistant US Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO policy, said this in an interview for The Sun. He believes Moscow is defeatable in Ukraine, but only if the West fully leverages its economic and military dominance. Instead of seeking a negotiated settlement, he says the focus should be on overwhelming Russia's capacity to continue the war. I feel the Russians will continue the war and have the capacity to drive forward for quite a long time. I do think that Russia is defeatable in this war, and to do that doesn't mean that one should run to Russia asking for a deal to end the war. One has to get into the Soviet mindset. Brzezinski underlined. The former Deputy Assistant U.S. Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO policy added that to accelerate the breaking point, the West must apply the same tactics that helped undermine the Soviet Union. This includes ramping up military support for Ukraine, tightening the economic stranglehold on Russia, and launching an aggressive information campaign targeting Moscow's political elite. Brzezinski explains that the goal is to force Putin to focus inward, worrying more about his own survival than his expansionist ambitions. Now, as history repeats itself, only a return to Cold War tactics can finally bring Putin to his knees, says the former Deputy Assistant U.S. Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO policy. Brzezinski also told the journalist that NATO defense spending, currently rising, is already 10 times Russia's estimated $120 to $150 billion annual military budget. Despite this overwhelming advantage, the West has so far failed to exercise its power to end the war on Ukraine's terms, and is yet to deliver a true knockout to Putin's economy and war machine. We have yet to really body slam the Russian economy. We can do that, Brzezinski said. We haven't, and this allows the Russian war machine to drive forward. Brzezinski believes a more aggressive approach, such as cutting off all access to Western financial systems and targeting Russia's energy and revenue streams, could force Moscow into a crisis it cannot survive. Another key factor is undermining Putin at home by engaging the Russian people. He added that the most decisive step is fast-tracking Ukraine into NATO to give it lasting security guarantees. He explained that is probably the only thing that will convince Putin that Ukraine is no longer in the grey zone, vulnerable to his ambitions. Even if a ceasefire is reached, lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine is unlikely for generations, the expert says. He underlined that the brutality of Russia's invasion has created wounds too deep to heal anytime soon. That's a consequence of the savagery and the butchery that the Russians have executed on Russian territory against Ukrainians, he said. The expert believes that as long as Putin is in office, it will be very difficult for Ukraine to have a peaceful relationship with Russia. Instead, the best-case scenario would have been a long but stable confrontation, similar to the Cold War.